This program on investing under regulation crowdfunding is not investment advice.
Rising with the crowd, power unbound, change makers lead where hope is found. Superpowers for good, shaping the fate. Investors and dreamers open the gate. Supercross stands loud, proud and true, building tomorrow for me and you.
Welcome to this special episode, this special live episode of the Superpowers for Good show from the Super Crowd. This is sponsored by our friends at 2020 GeneSystems. We're so grateful for their sponsorship and support. I'm going to have with us today the CEO of 2020 GeneSystems himself, Jonathan Cohen. He is an extraordinary entrepreneur who's done some incredible things. I want to just share to introduce what he's going to bring. Let me just play a quick video to introduce 2020 GeneSystems to you now.
A biotech patent attorney at a large Washington, D.C. law firm to becoming a startup entrepreneur took a turn in the wake of 9/11 and the deadly anthrax attacks that followed. Emergency responders were overwhelmed with 911 calls due to fears of suspicious powders. As a former volunteer firefighter and EMT, I wanted to help find a solution and quickly assembled a team that invented, patented, and commercialized a very successful test kit called BioCheck that became the accepted gold standard for emergency responders worldwide and is used to this day to screen suspicious powders for bioterror agents. Some years later, it became evident that our fire department customers were losing many members to cancer, some at a young age. Studies confirmed that firefighters disproportionately succumb to that disease due to increased exposures to carcinogens. We then set out to introduce a blood test to aid in the early detection of cancer, beginning with a test for lung cancer, which is the leading cause of cancer death, both in firefighters and the general population. We partnered with leading organizations such as Abbott Diagnostics, which contributed technology, and the U.S. National Cancer Institute, which provided us with research funding. It then became clear that the market required help to detect other cancers as well, including those of the pancreas, ovaries, liver, and prostate. Using data from tens of thousands of individuals, we developed and validated our flagship product, OneTest, for the early detection of multiple cancers, which became one of the first multi-cancer blood tests to enter the American market. Multi-cancer early detection blood tests are generating excitement from leading medical authorities, best-selling authors, the investor community, the media, and government health agencies. Medicare has indicated that they will likely begin covering multi-cancer tests in 2028, and bipartisan legislation in Congress, co-sponsored by more than 2/3 of its members, is providing them authority to do so. Our cancer screening blood test has already been used by thousands of people who seek to avoid late-stage diagnosis, including hundreds of fire departments. The test is now available to everyone who wants to improve their odds of detecting cancers earlier when they can be most effectively and affordably treated.
Jonathan, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you.
Yeah, I apologize. So we just got hit with, I'm in the Washington, D.C. area and got hit with a snowstorm. I thought I was going to do this from the office, but I looked out my window and I decided I needed to get home before I would have been stuck there all night. So I had to make a last minute. So I do apologize for the delay.
No, it's totally fine. We're live. We're everywhere on the interwebs, including E360 TV, and we've got an audience gathered. We're thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for joining us for this special live episode. I want to jump on here and make sure that folks know quickly how they can participate, because you are conducting right now a crowdfunding offering on Wefunder that people can invest in. Tell us a little bit, probably shouldn't get into deal terms, but tell us about the offering, why you're raising on Wefunder, and how people can find it.
Thank you very much, Devin. Again, I apologize. So I think I'm not supposed to say that the campaign ends Friday at midnight, but if I was allowed to say that, I would. But that is in fact the case, and we're just shy of about $500,000. We've done a number of crowdfunding campaigns. We were one of the first life science companies to successfully raise capital through equity crowdfunding, have about 8,000 shareholders, because I think a lot of people see our opportunity as a way to do well and do good. In other words, we provide a very good likely return on investment, and I'll talk a bit about that. But we are a company that is already saving lives. Most life science companies, most biotech companies, particularly the therapeutic side, are at best maybe entering phase 2 clinical trials. The overwhelming majority of them will ultimately not bring a product to market, not because of any fault of their own. It's the nature of the risk of drug development. We are in a different segment of life sciences, namely the diagnostics segment, and we are already growing. So we did a little over $2 million in revenue last year, which was double the prior year, which was double 2022. So we've now had 3 consecutive years of revenue doubling, and everything indicates that 2025 will be no exception. So what we do is we have a multi-cancer early detection blood test, or MCED, that we now offer throughout the United States.
This is really great stuff. I just want to share a quick story to frame how important this is to me. And I think I'm not the only one with this kind of experience, right? I am not unique, but in 2018, late 2017, really, my dad started feeling a variety of symptoms and knew something wasn't right, kept going to the doctor. They were trying everything to figure out what was wrong. They didn't diagnose him with pancreatic cancer until it was way too late. There was no hope. He in fact died 9 days after the diagnosis. 9 days, and that isn't that unusual. Pancreatic cancer. I think there are other cancers that are like that, where the diagnosis tends to come late, too often, too late. How have you changed the game? I don't understand the technology and why it is that why we haven't been doing this before, and now you've got it figured out.
Well, yeah, but we're not entirely alone. So our approach is modeled after an approach that is not only common in East Asia, it's almost universal. So virtually all adults, middle-aged and above, in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, mainland China, Singapore, will go once a year to something called a health check center, and they get a physical exam. Not 20 minutes like you get here in the United States, but 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours, usually paid for by employers. And it invariably begins with a blood draw, and they measure what are called protein tumor markers, or tumor antigens. So I want to be clear, notwithstanding gene in our name, and we're going to change that part of our name before we go forward with an IPO. We are not looking at DNA sequences. Our competition, virtually all of it, particularly Grail Gallery, looks at DNA sequences. Proteins are advantageous for 3 reasons. It's far more affordable. They're less expensive to test. We can utilize capillary collected blood, small amounts of blood from the upper arm that don't require traditional venipuncture. So our test, for example, can be tested at home, accessed at home, or even we recently have entered a pilot with the largest supermarket chain here in the Washington, D.C. area, Giant Pharmacy. So it's more accessible. But to the point that you just brought up, proteins seem to be detectable in blood in earlier stages than DNA sequencing. So pancreatic cancer, and I'm sorry to hear about your father, that is one of the cancers I think we're making the biggest impact. And we last year participated in a blinded validation study conducted by the U.S. National Cancer Institute, where they sent us about 800 specimens that were collected in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And we correctly identified 50% of early stage 1 and 2 pancreatic cancers. And these were blood specimens that were taken, that were drawn before the individual was diagnosed, that is the gold standard. You want to correctly identify cancer in specimens collected prior to diagnosis, not at the time of diagnosis. So that is good data that we have. So I think ovarian cancer, the same thing. We also detected half of early stage 1 and 2 ovarian cancers. Yeah. And with serial testing, with repeat testing, yearly or even semi-annually, we think we'll get about 2/3. About 65% of early stage pancreatic, ovarian, and several otherwise deadly solid tumors. So to the best of our knowledge, we're the only company right now offering a tumor antigen-based MSET rather than a DNA-based MSET.
That's powerful stuff because it's so much more affordable, making it more accessible, much more likely that insurance companies will cover it in a variety of circumstances. We've got a question from the crowd. Carol Bryant has asked, you mentioned upcoming patent expansions and collaborations with a major cancer center. How will those deals enhance 2020's competitive edge in the diagnostic space?
Great question. Yes, we're very opportunistic, collaborative, and transactional. And our goal in 2025 is to conduct an IPO, and as part of that, part of the use of proceeds is to conduct something called a roll-up, where we're acquiring assets from a variety of companies and academic medical centers that are connected to us, either suppliers, distributors, or sources of intellectual property. Now, I am a patent attorney by background, so we have our own patent estate, but we are looking for and expect to soon, we have several pending licensing transactions in the works. One of them, by the way, is going to be related to a new product called OneTest for longevity. And OneTest for longevity is looking at biomarkers of inflammation, like CRP and IL-6. And that product will be very closely linked to dietary choices. So individuals will have an immediate set of recommendations on how to change their diet, not through purchasing of supplements. Most labs in the space tend to promote supplements, powders and potions, and the science behind supporting that is marginal, but eating the whole foods is really the ideal thing. So we think that'll be another opportunity, and that should be an early version of that test could be out before the end of this quarter, before the end of March. So that's something we do engage with academic medical centers at every opportunity.
That's great. Now, I want to make sure the audience is dialed into the fact that they can ask questions. The questions trigger is, let's see, let me put it back on the screen here. Shannon, forgive me. But if you click on or just scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, or type into your browser s4g.biz/2020quest, you can submit a question via email in essence, or if you are watching, most of our viewers are watching on television, on E360 TV. We welcome all of you. But of course, some of you are watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And if you're there, you can submit your questions in the comments on the video player. So I encourage you to do that. Just submit your questions as a comment, and we should be able to grab those, see them, and read them. If you don't see your question answered promptly, I encourage you to use the form here at s4g.biz/2020quest.
I do see a question from Jason, if I may, and I see that here, and it's a great question. If I may jump in, and
Yeah,
what are the
please
biggest
do.
regulatory hurdles for broad adoption of OneTest, and how do you see insurance reimbursement? Great question. Let me take each one. They're separate. They're different answers. So the good news for us is I do not anticipate regulatory hurdles. Now, there was an effort over many years. Well, let me back up. We are regulated as a lab. So OneTest is what's called a lab developed test, or LDT. That has historically been regulated by CMS through something called CLIA, C-L-I-A, and state health departments. So we have been and continue to be regulated both federally and at the state level, but it's a lower bar. We are not regulated by FDA, and it does not appear likely that that will change for the foreseeable future. That's the good news. Reimbursement, interesting arena. There is a bill in this Congress, and it was in the last Congress, that came incredibly close to passing. Remember the continuing resolution back in December that was about 1,200 pages, and then Elon Musk trashed it on X, and then it got cut down by the Republican House to 120 pages or so. That part of the bill got cut out, but it's been reintroduced in the new Congress. It has an excellent chance of passing because it has about 300 co-sponsors, Republican and Democrat. That is more than half of Congress as co-sponsors, backed by the American Cancer Society and some other groups. That bill authorizes, doesn't require, but authorizes CMS, Medicare, to have reimbursement for MSEDs, multi-cancer test, of which right now there's only two. There will be more. There will be more competition, but right now there's only two. I don't want to get into a lot of, even though I'm in Washington, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the intricacies of our whole reimbursement system. But I would just say that's a major hurdle. My best guess is that by the end of this decade, 28, maybe 2029, there will be reimbursement, at least for Medicare for MSEDs. The private insurance will likely follow. So for the next few years, our product is either self-pay, cash pay from consumers, or businesses pay for it. Our biggest segment of B2B are fire departments. Firefighters have proven high incidence and death for a variety of cancers. That has been established by studies by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And the firefighters know it and are actively looking. So there is actually reimbursement from about half a dozen states, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Maryland, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and I think one more, have programs in the multi-million-dollar range to reimburse their fire departments for multi-cancer tests. We are doing very well with that market. So we see continuing revenue growth with a line of sight to profitability well into 2027, 2028, at which time we may see some form of reimbursement, traditional reimbursement. I don't think it's going to happen next year or the year after. So that's a long answer to a short but very important question.
Yeah, that's
other questions.
Yeah, we got another great question that has come in, and I'm glad you had the discussion about firefighters, because I think that's so critically important. It sort of gets at an aspect of your story that we shared before you joined us. Was that it was 9/11 that inspired your career trajectory that has brought you here. And the firefighters were such an important part in 9/11, and of course, the impacts that they suffered. So it's really, I think, great that you are continuing to serve that community. But the new question that came in from David Spielman is, your AI-powered algorithms play a crucial role in refining test accuracy. Can you elaborate on how your AI models improve detection rates and their future potential?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we have publications going back several years where we took, so our original data set came from Taiwan, where a reputable academic medical center, kind of the Mayo Clinic of Taiwan, took a look at they do this similar biomarkers there, and they looked at data from 30,000 individuals, and they went look at the registry and concluded that their performance actually was quite good. In other words, people that they tested that had cancer, they had biomarkers. We then work with them. This goes back to about 2017, 2018, to improve using standard cutoffs, using machine learning. So we were early in integrating AI with laboratory medicine. It is much more common today than it was 8 years ago. And we markedly improved the sensitivity and specificity, the ability to detect cancers and avoid false positives. So we have all of that data. I can't spit out the numbers off the top of my head right now, but machine learning in this context genuinely adds a lot of value, because the algorithms don't look at each marker in isolation. It looks synergistically, almost like a basketball team, where each player enhances the other player. And that was and still is a fairly important innovation. And we have some broad patent protection around use of various machine learning approaches with these types of biomarkers, which, as I said, are very common in that part of the world. And I think as the best validation of that is that we actually offer our test remotely on the cloud to labs back in Taiwan, where the original work was done, through a software as a service agreement. It's not a big part of our business, but there is, they do hundreds of these tests, and they use our algorithms for that. So that's a pretty nice, I think that's flattering that in a part of the world where they do these tests all the time, they see value in our algorithms. Good question.
Yeah, you mentioned that you are working to be IPO ready, and I think that's an exciting part of your trajectory and your potential. Of course, it seems like it's hard to predict when that might happen, how soon, if it will ever happen. And there are other things, other ways to get liquidity and an exit. But I wonder if you would if you can talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done to be IPO ready.
Good. Yeah, I believe strongly that that the crowd community and the crowd-funded companies need to look hard at the IPO markets, because if we're going to have a robust crowdfunding community, just as we've made it easier for ordinary Americans to buy stock in pre-IPO companies, they also need to be able to sell that stock. And it's not easy to do if you're not listed on a national exchange. So the good news is there are indications that the new SEC, under Paul Atkins as chairman, and this Congress, particularly with Chairman French Hill of the House Financial Services Committee, want to see more companies go public. So we're looking to be one of the pioneers in that, and we have taken some steps as recently as last week to move that process along. No guarantees of success. It's still a very difficult IPO market, although it is a bit easier than it was last year and the year before. But as long as interest rates remain high, and they're still quite high, it will not be an easy market the way it was in 2020 or 2021. So, but I do think that is very, very important. And we're doing everything we can to be we've done it a lot to be IPO ready. Now, what does that exactly mean? So the good news for investors in Reg A or Reg CF offerings is we do a lot of the things that public companies need to do. We have audits every year, full audits, the same kind of audits that public companies get. And we also have to report to the SEC. In under Reg A, you do that twice a year. As a traditional public company, you do that 4 times a year. So we're doing about half of what is required, but we have that experience of doing it. So I think that in many ways, I think investing in companies on Wefunder and Start Engine that are doing Reg CF and Reg A offerings is a good thing for investors because you have more transparency than you would otherwise have with a traditional Reg D or traditional private placement.
Yeah, hey, Jonathan, I really am, I'm loving this conversation. We've got about 30 minutes to go, but I've got a great video clip that I think it might make sense for me to share. It's just if I share this, it's gonna kind of kick us off the screen, but this is your CFO talking about the business, and it may make sense for us to take a quick 1 minute pause while we share this quick video clip. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
All righty. I'll just drop this clip into the player here. Here we go.
Prior to joining 2020 as CFO, I was the VP of Finance at a company called Paragon Bioservices, which was sold to Catalent Pharma Solutions in 2019 for $1.2 billion. In many ways, 2020 reminds me of that company around the time I joined, demonstrating with its multi-cancer tests the potential for huge upsides for its shareholders. As of September 2024, our company has experienced about 10 consecutive quarters of revenue growth, has a relatively modest burn rate, low cost of customer acquisition, and a line of sight to profitability with the addition of relatively small amounts of capital. With Congress expected to soon pave the way for Medicare reimbursement for multi-cancer tests, I expect 2020's revenues to rise dramatically before the end of this decade. We maintain public company audits and are positioning ourselves for an IPO when the market conditions become optimal. Because of our progress over the past year or so, we have been approached by several large companies that could be near-term commercial partners and eventual acquirers.
Welcome back, everyone. Let me just take a minute to tell you what we're doing here today. We're so fortunate. We're grateful to our sponsor today, 2020 GeneSystems, but they've given us an opportunity to have this live session with the CEO, Jonathan Cohen, to talk about and really kind of get into the nuts and bolts, get into the weeds a little bit, mixing my metaphors, but we're excited to have the opportunity to really have a deep conversation with a super innovative entrepreneur and CEO, Jonathan Cohen of 2020 GeneSystems, who is right now, this minute, conducting a crowdfunding offering, a securities offering via Wefunder. It allows ordinary folks, anyone watching, is eligible to invest in this opportunity. It's an extraordinary, I think, opportunity to invest and learn more about the business of 2020 GeneSystems. And of course, 2020 GeneSystems is in the business of preventing cancer or treating cancer early by creating an affordable testing system for multiple cancers that allows it to become possible for people to just routinely be screened for cancer risk and dramatically reducing the incidence of late term diagnoses where you can't be treated. So this is a big deal. We're excited to be here today. Let me bring back Jonathan to the stage here with me. Jonathan, you've been at this for a while, and you've done just an incredible job of building this business to this point. Tell us about some of your additional plans going forward. How do you grow and scale this business What are you expanding into beyond cancer? We've touched on a few of these topics, but give us a sense of the medium to long-term trajectory for 2020 GeneSystems.
Great. So I think that we will. I'm very optimistic about this longevity test. There are others out there, of course. They tend to be quite expensive. Most of the longevity tests that I'm aware of either measure a whole bunch of biomarkers, or they use some form of sequencing. They look at telomerase or telomeres, which is definitely a scientifically valid approach, or the microbiome. Microbiome is extraordinarily important, but microbiome testing involves stool specimens, which for obvious reasons do not always appeal to people to collect stool specimens. So using the same theme that we did with OneTest for cancer, namely making the test affordable and easily accessible, our test will be minimalist in terms of the number of biomarkers. We're starting with one, namely CRP, which you can get from your doctor. You can get from LabCorp. I think LabCorp charges $59. We'll just be a tad higher than that. But we're going to provide a lot of more actionable intelligence about what you can do to lower your chronic inflammation and associated risk of really 8 of the 10 leading causes of death in America: heart disease, several cancers, diabetes, Alzheimer's, even depression and dementia. That is a tremendous amount of value. In the last 10 years, there's more and more evidence that lifestyle changes, especially eating, can have by far a bigger impact than any drug that can be, whether it's over the counter or prescription. Now, so we want to do our part in trying to make, to help people make changes in their diet and exercise programs, and believe that having something tangible and quantitative, numerical, for some, not everyone, but for some, will be a motivator. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're now in Giant Food, which is the largest grocery chain here in the District, Maryland and Virginia region. And they're owned by a company that has brands up and down the East Coast: Food Lion, Stop and Shop, Hannaford, and so forth. We started with our multi-cancer test, but I think this inflammatory panel is really the right fit, and they feel that way too. So you'll be able to, in a grocery store, get guidance as to what foods will help you avoid 8 of the 10 leading causes of death, and age in a more healthy way. So it's well span. It's not just it's health span, not just lifespan. So a lot of buzz right now around this with RFK Jr. It appears that his confirmation is now imminent, and he has certainly his controversies. But what's less controversial than his position on, for example, vaccines, are his approaches toward chronic disease in America. And I suspect there will be a host of initiatives coming out later this year, maybe in 2026, from CDC, CMS, NIH, FDA, looking for ways to help Americans, motivate Americans to improve their diet and lower their risk of chronic disease. So that is something I'm very excited about, and we will be moving forward, I think, very, very aggressively as we also work toward becoming a public company. at the same time.
Jonathan, one of the great things that you have done is kind of an innovative approach for gathering the sample. And I think this is really an important piece of what you're doing. How are folks gathering and providing you with a sample? Because this is something they can do at home, right? But you are gathering blood. Am I understanding correctly?
I am. And actually, I might, if we do pause for the next video clip, I'm going to go grab a device to actually show your viewers what it looks like. It's maybe 25 or 30 feet from me.
Okay, but, I'll run a quick video here.
I want to show. Yeah, there you go. My journey from being a biotech patent attorney at a large Washington, D.C. law firm to becoming a startup entrepreneur took a turn in the wake of 9/11 and the deadly anthrax attacks that followed. Emergency responders were overwhelmed with 911 calls due to fears of suspicious powders. As a former volunteer firefighter and EMT, I wanted to help find a solution and quickly assembled a team that invented, patented, and commercialized a very successful test kit called BioCheck that became the accepted gold standard for emergency responders worldwide and is used to this day to screen suspicious powders for bioterror agents. Some years later, it became evident that our fire department customers were losing many members to cancer, some at a young age. Studies confirmed that firefighters disproportionately succumb to that disease due to increased exposures to carcinogens. We then set out to introduce a blood test to aid in the early detection of cancer, beginning with a test for lung cancer, which is the leading cause of cancer death, both in firefighters and the general population. We partnered with leading organizations such as Abbott Diagnostics, which contributed technology, and the U.S. National Cancer Institute, which provided us with research funding. It then became clear that the market required help to detect other cancers as well, including those of the pancreas, ovaries, liver, and prostate. Using data from tens of thousands of individuals, we developed and validated our flagship product, OneTest, for the early detection of multiple cancers, which became one of the first multi-cancer blood tests to enter the American market. Multi-cancer early detection blood tests are generating excitement from leading medical authorities, best-selling authors, the investor community, the media, and government health agencies. Medicare has indicated that they will likely begin covering multi-cancer tests in 2028, and bipartisan legislation in Congress, co-sponsored by more than 2/3 of its members, is providing them authority to do so. Our cancer screening blood test has already been used by thousands of people who seek to avoid late-stage diagnosis, including hundreds of fire departments. The test is now available to everyone who wants to improve their odds of detecting cancers earlier, when they can be most effectively and affordably treated. Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So show us the device there.
All right. So this is a device that, and there are a few of them on the market, but this one works best for us because it reliably collects about 1/2 of a milliliter, which is what we need. That pain, it adheres to the upper arm. You have to roll up your sleeve and you flick the switch, and it reliably, about 95% of the time for people, collects what we need, about 1/2 ml or 500 microliters. So that is what about 2/3 of our consumers, and also many of our business customers are opting for that, because you avoid the painful needle, and you don't have to make a separate appointment with a phlebotomist. You don't have to go to a LabCorp or Request Patient Service Center. You don't have to go to your doctor's office. So you can test it. You can collect at home, and then this comes off. There's a cap, and it's sent to our lab, where it's processed in 3 days, 3 business days, 4 business days. You can go on to, you get an email from us, and you go to the portal and you get your results. That's how it works.
This is great. I just love this. It looks like there's a new great question that's come in from Donald Hebert. You mentioned upcoming patent expansions and collaborations with a major cancer center. How will these deals enhance 2020's competitive edge in the diagnostic space?
Well, again, we are looking for we do look for new intellectual property that we can bolt on, and this is part of our again our roll up strategy, which will include academic medical centers. So I'm not at liberty to get specific at this point, but we do both in the cancer and the longevity area have an array of relationships, both domestic and overseas, that will help us with with our building our moat, if you will. And again, patent expansions. I am a patent attorney by background, so we're always looking for ways to grow our patent estate. And new areas include things around capillary collection. We have some very exciting ideas around the new revenue models as we enter into the whole nutritional or food as medicine arena. So lots of exciting things to come, but not all of which I can talk in a public manner about for obvious reasons.
Yeah, one of the challenges we face unequivocally in the regulation crowdfunding arena is the limitations on what we can talk about in a forum like this. But a lot of the things people want to know that we can't talk about are available very publicly on the Wefunder page, right? So people can go there and learn more, including, most specifically deal terms and that sort of thing that we're not supposed to talk about outside of Wefunder. You can go and the QR code on the screen right now directs people straight to the Wefunder page. We're not tracking that in any way. And so if you visit wefunder.com/2020, there's a dot missing in that there. I apologize. Isn't there a dot in the URL?
No, I think you got it right. It's wefunder.com/2020 GeneSystems.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
believe there's
Yeah.
a dot.
Okay.
I think that's
Excellent.
exactly right. You got it right.
Okay. So yeah, maybe it works both ways. In any case, that is clearly working. And so, yeah, visit there and folks can learn more, including getting some of those deal points answered that they may be curious about. Let's see. Is there another question that's come in here?
Let's see.
Yeah, John Mason asked you focused on firefighter health programs. What's the strategy for expanding into other employer sectors, and what response have you seen so far?
Great question. So at the end of last year, our largest order of the year came not from a fire department, but from a nonprofit organization um, interestingly called Hunter 7, hunter7.org. It's spelled with this by letters, not by numerals. That is developed by, it was a veteran founded organization specifically focused on post 9/11 warfighters that had, particularly from the Iraq War, that had exposures to not only these burn pits but other noxious fires and other dangerous chemicals. So we that was our largest order, and they've ordered a few times. That was just in December, I believe. So we are expanding into the veterans, particularly the post 9/11 veterans. We are looking at the petroleum workers, both gas stations and people involved in refineries. There is some evidence of higher risk for various cancers. But the reality is, aging is the number one contributor to cancer. So as long as you're getting older, you're at risk for cancers. And so we believe that everybody should be screened once you're in your mid 40s, at least, ideally once a year if possible. especially if it's affordable and convenient. So yes, we are expanding on the employment front, but I don't want to minimize how big the firefighter market is. Again, there's over 20,000 fire departments in the United States, and they're actively right now looking for multi-cancer early detection tests, and there is state funding for that, and federal funding under FEMA. So just that market alone could probably get us to 65 million in revenue before you add on the longevity test, before you talk about consumers or even other markets. So we're doing very well, and we've really we have a line of sight to profitability. So we are very disciplined about spending, and we get a very good repeat order, particularly from the B2B side, where about 40% of people are ordering year over year. And that's great fundamentals for a business. So we don't have to constantly be spending money to get in new customers.
Yeah, this is great stuff. It's so exciting to think about the potential scale. You talk about reaching 65 million just from predominantly from the firefighter market, and that is exciting. That is a huge business.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. Millions upon millions of businesses start every year. Well, exist. A few million start every year, and very few reach that kind of scale.
Right.
And yet, in a way, that's still just beginning to poke at the potential of this, because as you were talking about this, the fact is we're all aging, every one of us, and would benefit tremendously from the kind of screening you can do right now. And wow, that is so powerful. It's game changing for society to think about the quality of life we can lead if we get our cancer detected early instead of late. It's just huge. As you think about some of the milestones you've crossed, let's review for a minute, if you would. What are some of the things that you have done to date that are impressive and demonstrate the real progress? Because this is not a 2024 startup. We're not talking about a business plan. We're not talking about an idea or even a perfected technology. This is an ongoing business that's growing and scaling, right?
Correct. So I think the biggest milestone was finding a customer base that not only would order and reorder. We tried a few different angles, but I think getting a foothold into the fire department market was really, really critical for us. Another important milestone was the introduction of what we call OneTest Premium. That tests not only the tumor markers, tumor antigens like CEA, CA125. And when you think of antigen, think of PSA. Many of your listeners, I assume, get a PSA test every year or two. The A in PSA, males, of course, it's a prostate-specific antigen, so the A is antigen, and CEA, the A is antigen. So the standard test is only looking at about 6 tumor antigens. Premium also looks at a panel of inflammatory and metabolic markers. That was developed by a company in Korea and exclusively licensed to us. So that was a milestone. Another milestone was validating our test with capillary collection. That is not a trivial accomplishment, because in order to offer a lab test complying with CLIA, remember I mentioned CLIA, which is a state and federal program. It's not trivial. It's not like getting an FDA approval, but there's a lot you have to go through. And when you transition from traditional venous blood to capillary blood, you have to ensure that the biomarkers are equivalent. You cannot assume that to be the case. And to do that, you have to look at not only people with normal biomarkers, but people with high biomarkers, each one of them, which meant that we had to get blood from a lot of cancer patients. We had to get a traditional venipuncture and capillary, and then compare the two. So lots of that work was done last year using funding from primarily from our profits that we earned during COVID. During COVID, we, like many labs, pivoted to doing PCR testing in a lab and got contracts with our state and county government to do that. Generated millions in profits, and then we redeployed those profits to get premium launched and to get the capillary validated so that we could launch that. Now
That
we're
is
going back to the finance. So we did not have to do much fundraising over the past 5 years because we did very little because we had profits from COVID. That is, of course, in the rear view mirror. We hope it stays there. I think everyone does. However, that's why we are really accessing the capital markets first with Wefunder and hopefully soon with an IPO, a microcap IPO. Yep.
this is very exciting to be thinking about. The progress you've made, the milestones you've achieved are very exciting. As we think about where we are in the program, we have fewer than 10 minutes to go in the program. So folks, if you're watching, I really want to encourage you to hop on and submit your questions now. And I want to remind you that the offering ends soon. And I want to encourage you, don't miss out on this opportunity to help advance health in America and around the world by investing in this business. That opportunity could evaporate here in the next, it's going to evaporate soon. So check it out right now. You don't want to miss it. But I would encourage you to submit your questions now. We've got just a few minutes left. If you've got a question for Jonathan, please submit that now. Jonathan, I hate to get personal in a way, but I kind of started the show there with the story of my father who died of pancreatic cancer. My mother-in-law also died of colon cancer. And so 50% of my wife and our parents died of cancer. Cancer is a huge problem. I wonder if you've had people in your family who've experienced cancer diagnosis, if you've lost anyone to cancer. Is there a personal motivation for you in this work?
Well, sure. I mean, thankfully in our family, we don't have a huge amount of cancer, but I've lost coworkers and I've lost friends to cancer. I was a volunteer firefighter in the 80s when we did not clean our turnout gear like they do today. So it's a community that I'm very interested in and close to. 3 of my 4 daughters at one time or another have been members of volunteer fire departments. They haven't been firefighters, they've been emergency medical technicians. But so I've always been interested, and I was earlier in my career helped develop and commercialize a very successful product for the firefighter market, fire department market of screening suspicious powders. It was not related to cancer. So I've always been interested in that community. And aside from the the cold statistics that you read from NIOSH and stuff, when you go around to these departments, the anecdotes are really breathtaking. You hear about young men, and about 95% of firefighters in the United States are men to this day. Not all, but most are men. You hear about prostate cancer in people in their 30s, which is very weird, very unusual. Pancreatic cancer, people in their 40s. Strange. So you can't help but be motivated by that. And I think between our multi-cancer early detection test and our inflammatory test, which is a little more on the prevention side, that's really the 1-2 punch that I think is going to bring down cancer mortality in a substantial way. Drug development is exciting. There have been some important breakthroughs with immunotherapy, targeted therapy, gene therapy. But when you look at the statistics, they tend to work for a small percentage of people to whom they're very expensive, very expensive. lots of side effects, and they're not curative except in extremely rare cases. At best, they extend life a couple of months. I'm talking about for advanced cancers. Early detection is essentially curative. If you detect a cancer, cancer is not lethal. Metastasis is what kills. So if you can detect cancer early enough to be surgically removed before it spreads, you have a cure. And I think this is really the time now, our moment, where diagnostics has never been the favorite, of venture capitalists and private equity investors and even the public markets. I'm starting to see a little bit of a shift. I see another question from Todd. If I may, beyond cancer detection, you've hinted at developing tests for, longevity, healthy aging. What innovations are on the horizon? How do they lie with our missions? Well, I think, Todd, you've kind of answered the question. So I think we're going to focus heavily now on healthy aging, on longevity, with an initial focus on inflammation, because inflammation is, I won't say it's everything, but it's pretty darn close. Again, chronic, not acute inflammation. Inflammation is fine when you have a bug bite or a cold or an injury. That's when your immune system's working the way it should. We're not supposed to have chronic, always on inflammatory responses. That comes from, in many cases, the standard American diet and also obesity. And if we can reduce chronic inflammation, we can do a huge amount to reduce, uh, illness and death, in life expectancy in America. And our hypothesis, not yet proven, but there is some evidence to this, that what do we have to measure that today? We have your scale, and your clothing, right? You can say, well, these pants fit me. A few months ago, they're tight now. Obviously, I've gained weight. We have our scale. But why not use biomarker tracking, blood tests, as a visible, tangible, objective, quantitative measurement to motivate people? Won't work for everybody, but for a lot of people, myself included, I like numbers. I want to see numerical progress. So I think that's going to consume much of 2025 for us, those two products. Beyond that, there are some other things we have in mind, but I think that there's a lot between those two things. Other questions, if any?
Yeah, Jonathan, we're about out of time,
Okay.
but I really want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I think we've had some great questions come in, some great discussion. I'm glad the snow didn't get you.
It was
It's
close. It
yeah,
was close. I was cursing myself as I was driving because I was trying to stay. I had a nice visual back. You've seen my background with the lab and everything.
yeah,
So I was trying to wait it out, but I kept looking out the window and I said, no way. No way.
yeah.
If I had done that, I'd be sleeping there in the lab
That's
today.
right. You don't want to
So
sleep.
I
in the
made the
lab.
call. But it took a little longer to get. So I appreciate the patience of you and your audience, and I do welcome you. I hope that you all consider our opportunity and being
Yeah.
part of this adventure.
Take 30 seconds now as we wrap up and tell people how they can connect with you personally. If they'd like to schedule, say, a one-on-one meeting to make a decision about investing a large amount in this round, how do
Absolutely.
they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm gonna put the in the private chat the email. Just go to investors@2020gene.com. I get those along with other people on our team. I've just put it into the private chat. Again, it's investors with an S at 2020gene.com. Devin also knows how to reach me. You can also send questions on the Wefunder page through the end of this week. And we're not so hard to find, and we welcome questions, or welcome if you want to get on the phone with me, our chief scientific officer, chief medical officer, finance officer, whatever. We'll arrange it.
Okay, so there on the screen, investors@2020gene.com. is the way to get a question, and that would include getting a quick meeting between now and the end of this offering with Jonathan. Jonathan, we wish you every success. We hope this is a great closeout to the raise.
Thank you very much, Devin.
All
Have
right.
a nice evening.
Now, let's do some good.